Namaste. Open Conversations, the COVID tragedy, analysis and future vision. As a part of our series of open conversations, today we shall talk about the pandemic tragedy. The pandemic has left the world devastated. Millions have died and millions have been grieving and ruined. After the Second World War, it has been the biggest tragedy the human civilization has witnessed and experienced. This tragedy has set many people around the world rethinking the very fundamentals of our lives, like health, economics, politics, culture, and environment. This rethinking has led to a very obvious question: what to do now? Or what are we to do now? To discuss this very profound and contemporary topic, we have with us author and thinker Mr. Himanshu Vaidya. Namaste, Mr. Vaidya.
Namaste.
Mr. Vaidya, why have we chosen to discuss this pandemic tragedy today? I mean, why is it so important to us?
Five reasons. First is the scale of the tragedy. Even with 90% underreporting, we still see millions of people dying and millions of people pushed back into poverty line from which they had come out after decades of turmoil. We also see a complete collapse of public systems around the world. We have not even touched the interiors of Asia and Africa, where 75% of the tragedy has happened, and we still don't even know what has happened because there is no reporting from those places. And part of it we will never know even in future. I myself know of many villages in India where people have died out of COVID and they were just buried there. There was no statistical count, no admission to hospital, nothing. There is no way you can know the actual scope of the tragedy. Suffice it to say, it is the largest tragedy we have seen in a century. So the scale of the tragedy is the first element. The second element is what I call disappointment with SAD, SAD, science, allopathy, and democracy. So this tragedy, the COVID tragedy, has brought out our deep disappointment with the three: science, allopathy, and democracy. And they have all proved to be failures, complete failures in handling this pandemic. Third, the international system has completely failed, and this includes WHO. People feel across the world that WHO has been compromised by national, international, and corporate interests, and it is no longer science it is into. The science it talks about is actually a science which is captive to corporate greed or government interests. Fourth, uh, very importantly, people have realized that something is fundamentally wrong. Across the world, people have realized that something is fundamentally wrong with the way we are living individually and collectively, and with the way the systems are. People are not able to articulate in clear language what it is that is fundamentally wrong. And this is where our discussion comes in today, that unlike other discussions where you use COVID to beat somebody with a stick or to further your ideological viewpoint, we are here engaging in a constructive dialogue to analyze COVID, not just be content with the statistics, but to analyze COVID in a deeper way and try to find out what can we do for a future, which is more important. Tragedy, no matter how tragic, has happened, is in the past, nothing can be done about it. But lessons can be learned for future that it does not repeat. So this is a very important element that everyone in the world feels something is fundamentally wrong, not just something superficially wrong, or something wrong in this government department or that government department. Something is very fundamentally wrong. And they are not able to articulate, they cannot think clearly what it is, but they feel it intuitively. And what is fundamentally wrong is that all the pillars of our individual and collective life have proved to be fundamentally wrong. It is not one thing. It is the entire philosophical, administrative, and politico-economic structure with which we were living. The fundamentals of all of them have proved to be inadequate. The social aspect of life, economic aspect, political aspect, individual aspect, scientific aspect, in all the areas, there is a fundamental difficulty, fundamental errors in the very foundation of things. And this is what people are intuitively noticing but not able to articulate, which today's discussion will articulate. And lastly, uh, the question, which is a mystical question, that are we on this planet isolated and free as a species? And are we reaping consequences of just misfortune and our actions? Or is there a wider intelligence at play on the planet? And we are doing something terribly wrong because of which that intelligence is creating these tragedies. So that philosophical, metapsychological, parapsychological, occult, or spiritual, however you coin the word, that element of what was called by uh, ancient tribes as Gaia, uh, the earth consciousness. Is there something like a wider intelligence in nature, right? In the whirlwind of which we are just one more species, and somehow we are not able to read that intelligence, and therefore this has come about. So that's a much deeper mystical question. All these five elements are very important to be discussed, which emerged out of this COVID tragedy. And therefore, our discussion is very important. In a short discussion, we can cover these five elements more in a touch and go way, but in a deeper sense, I believe our today's discussion will start of a series of discussions among people and lead to a kind of an online community and online discussions, which will result in some sort of uh, global thinking and, if possible, some sort of NGO alliance and a global action plan.
So from what you are saying, it seems like that. I mean, it's not just a health tragedy or something. I think it's much, much deeper and much bigger than
Yes,
that in terms of the cosmic reality.
true.
So yes, it's much more profound than anyone can think in the very superficial way.
Yes, because um, this has five aspects. There is the first is the medical aspect, that this tragedy would not have occurred if allopathy had not failed us. So for the last 50 years, we have been worshipping allopathy, but it has come out that allopathy has severe limitations. First is that it always had severe limitations of side effects. It had no cure for psychosomatic sicknesses or lifestyle sicknesses. It had no cure for most of psychological sicknesses. And the control also used to come at very great side effects. So that was always there. And people already had started moving to holistic healing, even before COVID. But what COVID has done is magnified the inadequacy of allopathy
Right.
and put it starkly before everyone. And multinational corporations were trying their best to cover up the inadequacy of allopathy, but now they can't because it's everyone's experience. And no amount of advertisement and corporate communication can overrun your real life experience. And everyone's real life experience is a blatant inadequacy of allopathy. First, it has no cure for most of the diseases most of the world is suffering from. and control is at great cost. Second, vaccination, which we are looking at as a cure, is also a post facto phenomenon. Out of millions of viruses, you cannot prepare a vaccine for future virus to mutate. And how many vaccines will you take? Will you have this global vaccination once every 5 years for every new virus that comes? And this essentially is a post facto thing. Like you cannot be ready with some vaccine that this virus is going to come. Nobody knows which virus will come. And therefore, even if you have vaccine ready in 1.5 years, in that 1.5 years, 5 million people are already dead. So this entire approach needs a rethink. So allopathy is in severe question, and I personally feel that uh, holistic healing will substitute allopathy in times to come, and good parts of allopathy will become parts, very important part of that integrated medicine structure. So that is
Right.
one part. Second important element is the element of economics. That it has revealed how badly the distributive aspect of economics is working. That the capitalist model is very good in generating wealth, but very bad in distributing wealth. And this creates the need to graduate from capitalism to social capitalism. Because communism already has failed. We have no choice to go anywhere but to have modified forms of capitalism. So capitalism with more of a social conscience, that is second. Third is this whole element of political system, that the political systems have proved to be completely inadequate. What we have now are sham democracies in the name of democracies across the world, not only in developing countries, even in developed countries, the ordinary person has been thrown out of the system completely. It is a very elitist phenomenon. The whole political system is an elitist system. And therefore, it's actually a sham democracy which came out when ordinary people were running completely helpless to find out a hospital bed or to get oxygen or to fund their medical expenses. And they found themselves completely helpless. And the government was nowhere to be seen. And the leaders were nowhere to be seen. And this is a global phenomena which forces us to relook at the political system. The third part has to do with culture. That people living in nuclear families and people living alone, even more so, found it naturally unsustainable to face this crisis alone. So the whole concept of individual living and nuclear family, that has got into a question mark, because unless you live in a collectivity, you can't really face tragedy of this proportion in an efficient way. So the whole cultural way of how to live, that came into question. And the philosophy that governed us of individualism, science, materialism, that philosophy has come into question, which coincides with the end of modernity. All these five areas are very important, and these five areas uh, make us look at these five areas, make this analysis very important. That how to analyze these five areas, because they are deep areas and the questions are very, very fundamental. And unless such a deep analysis is made of the tragedy, we will remain superficial with journalistic debates,
Right.
not going into the depth of things. And therefore, these five aspects of the tragedy are very important to be deeply analyzed. And from there, a new philosophy and a future action plan to be created.
Mr. Vaidya, you just mentioned the five important aspects of this COVID tragedy. Allopathy, I mean, loss of faith in allopathy being the first one. So, can we go a little deeper into that area?
Yes, because the tragedy primarily arises because of limitations of allopathy. If allopathy had a cure, the tragedy would not have happened. Unfortunately, allopathy not only does not have a cure, but this whole business of evidence-based medicine, it has become a joke of the century the way allopathy and WHO handled this whole crisis. So first they said hydroxychloroquine, then they said plasma transplant, then they said steroids, then they said remdesivir, and a whole lot of drugs they tried, and they said they had some primary evidence for everything, and the evidence could not last for 3 months. So people have started questioning the quality of evidence. That is it evidence or is it a fashion show where you have a new collection every quarter? So this is the kind of thing which goes on in the name of science, and the thing that came out was whatever drugs were used to control COVID, they have created severe side effects. And in India, we see those news reports every day of steroids leading to diabetes, of mucormyosis happening, of vitamin D tablets leading to constipation and fissures and stomach ache and all sorts of things. So with newspapers covering it so deeply, the whole uh, aspect of limitation of allopathy has completely blown out into the public. And now people are asking about side effect of every medicine. And when they read about it, they don't dare to take medicine. That is the kind of side effects many of the medicines have.
Right.
So although it is very good in emergency, although it is scientifically researched, it still remains essentially an emergency medicine and not for psychosomatic troubles or psychological troubles which are essential or lifestyle troubles which are plaguing most of us, because 75% of sicknesses are in these categories. The real
Or even a
surgeries,
pandemic. Yeah,
or even a
sorry.
pandemic, the
Yeah.
surgeries or emergency medication or transplants, they are only 10% of the whole business. So my personal feeling is that classical allopathy as we know it, its beginning of its end has begun. And I feel over the next 25 years, the good part of it will survive, like good parts of everything will survive. But it will be a part of a larger integrated medicine structure. And what we see now doesn't have a very long life to go. And many people will shift, have already shifted. Ayurvedic medications, Ayurvedic products, homeopathic products, they have seen 200%, 300% jump in the pandemic because people realize allopathy doesn't have anything to offer. And what it offers is very great cost.
Yes.
So the whole paradigm, philosophy and paradigm of allopathy, along with its uh, difficult secrets, they are out in the open, and therefore we are seeing the, I think the peak of the allopathy was pre-COVID. With COVID, the descent of allopathy has started. And with that, the ascent of integrated medicine has started. And in the next 5 to 10 years, we will see it taking a more concrete and magnified form in society. And another element that comes out is this whole element of reckless greed in allopathy. In no other pathy I have
Yes.
seen that kind of mercenary attitude for money, what I have seen in allopathy. My own father was admitted and I have seen what these hospitals are doing. And I feel very strongly that a Patients Justice Commission should be set up to go into the excesses of allopathy. Multinational corporations who have given drugs with side effects, hospitals who have exploited patients, and get compensation for all the patients for last 50 years for whatever they have suffered for no fault of theirs because of allopathy. So possibly a United Nations led Patients Justice Commission globally. If it cannot be done, then in those countries where consumer voices are strong, consumer organizations, NGOs can pressurize the government to at least create a national level Patients Justice Commission to go into 50 years of allopathy and give justice to those who were hurt by allopathy. and I'm sure there would be millions out of it.
Right.
So this is very important element of a paradigm shift in the way we look at healing, because we realize that neither in viruses nor in bacteria nor in fungus, allopathy really has any cure for most of the difficult things. We have seen in mucormyosis how people have lost their eyes. There's nothing allopathy could do but to take out their eyes. I mean, that is no treatment at all. I mean, you can't call that treatment. It's a
It
desperate.
sounds more like quackery.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. I mean, it's something like you kill the man so he does not have fever, that kind of thing. You take out the eye, and then there's no mucormyosis, but the person's quality of life is gone completely.
True.
And I have seen many of my own friends who were not diabetic suddenly turning diabetic because of the steroids they were administered. So my personal feeling is that the difficult part of allopathy is now out in the open, and the ascent is complete. Descent has started, and very soon we will see the demise of allopathy as we know it. That is one part. Second
And
important thing,
also the commercial motivations behind this allopathic
yes, yes, absolutely.
practices now.
It's a white collar mafia. I call the hospitals, multinational corporations in pharmacies, and the insurance companies nothing other than white collar mafia. These are just well educated mafia men.
Yeah.
I mean, nothing drives them other than reckless greed. There's nothing of humanity or service to humanity which are given lip service. We all know behind that what is the true intention.
Right.
We also know it, they also know it, everyone knows it. It's a kind of an open secret.
It's an open secret. Yes,
It's an open secret.
exactly. Right.
Another important element that I found was uh, what many people have noticed, and I'm sure there will be many court cases on this. People who criticized allopathy or found some sort of relief or cure in some other pathy, they were attacked by the government under the pandemic laws, as though contempt of allopathy was equivalent to contempt of court or contempt of law. So the whole spirit of science, freedom of thought, freedom of expression, freedom of experimentation, everything was out of the window. And anybody who criticized allopathy was booked under the pandemic law. At least in India, this kind of things have happened, and I'm sure in other countries also it would have happened. So this hijacking of this entire law and order machinery by allopathy, and uh, almost an abrogation of freedom of speech, and dismissal of other forms of medicine and healing, including the traditional forms. I think that is something that we have to take it up globally for a debate and make some changes that it does not reoccur again. Allopathy is one of the many pathies. It is not the only pathy, and it cannot, I mean, elevate itself into a jury, judge, and executioner. So this is what has happened, and I think this is the a very important element to be debated now, and certain laws and programs to be put in place so that there is a judicious playing ground, an equal playing level playing field between various pathies, and the best of everything can emerge. And you can't have a situation where one pathy, because of commercial interest, silences all other forms of healing.
And rules the whole world.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. And rules very miserably without providing any benefit, because the only benefit that we see is the vaccination and how far it will go. There are millions of viruses. How many times will you vaccinate?
Even efficacy of this vaccine itself is I mean the medical fraternity is saying that there is no guarantee. I mean it may just save you from complications. That's all they can say.
Yeah, that is one caveat they put. The second caveat they put is we don't know how long the immunity will endure. Some people
Yes.
say 3 years, some people say 6 months, some people say 5 years. Nobody knows what it will turn out to be. Nobody has any idea if mutation happens beyond a point, what will be the response to that mutation. So
And long-term side effects of the vaccine itself
true, true.
in the human body.
Yeah. So those within allopathy itself, there is no consensus on this thing. However, it is marketed as though there is a rock solid consensus on something.
Yes, yes.
So I think this the first important outcome of this tragedy is a deep global debate on health and healing, and it will start by a debate on allopathy.
Now we go to the second aspect, the economic aspect. I mean, it's really hurt people in many, many different ways, uh, and very profoundly. So let's talk about that also.
Yeah, because uh, there are two aspects to it. One aspect is a large section of population did not have any work for the last 1.5 years. They had only token work off and on. They work for 10 days and the lockdown comes for another 10 days. Again, they go back to villages. Again, they come to cities. So practically, there has been no work for the last 1.5 years. And for countries like India or countries in Asia and Africa, this is a terrible situation because there is no social security system. So when you don't have any social security system and you have people unemployed for 1.5 years, they can survive on nothing except debt. And therefore, there is a global individual debt crisis which is on, which nobody is talking about. Because no government wants to talk about. If they talk about, they will have to foot the bill partially or totally in a democracy, which they don't want to. So this current crisis is at the in the economic realm related to a global individual debt crisis. That is one. Second, we have realized that medical insurance is out of reach for most of the people across the world. The way medical insurance costs are rising, it has gone out of reach of many people. And even when they have it, the insurance companies are finding some fine print or the other not to pay. So this thing brings in this whole element of free medical care, no matter what the cost. So this is a second important element that you cannot leave health and education to free markets. Free markets make a mess out of it. And this is a very important element of the economic thinking. The third important element is of the trickle down. The trickle down doesn't actually work at pace fast enough. And we require direct addressal of the problems, not to wait for the trickle down. The long run of the trickle down is too long to wait for. Fourth element is that uh, there is no alternative to a welfare state. Particularly in developing countries, there is no alternative because there is no other way that the bottom 50% of the population can come up by intervention of skills or employment opportunity, anything long term that is not actually a solution. The welfare state, there is no option but a welfare state. And this is in quite contrast to what is going on. And the economic models therefore need a complete rethinking. One, generation of wealth at the cost of environment. Two, distribution of wealth. Three, introduction of the welfare state. All of these are very important elements which somehow the current models are not addressing. And we require a fundamental rethink. We don't know what will come out of it, whether something will come out or not. I'm sure something will come out. Some modified form will come out. But we need some fundamental rethink on the way economic models are being done. And this, unfortunately, is not reaching to the policymakers. This is not even reaching to the upper middle classes and upper classes. And there is a complete shift in the society. There is a large section of society which is in dire conditions, and another section of society who does not need government at all. The upper middle class and the upper class can do without the government. I mean, they can arrange all that they want.
True.
And they are the opinion makers and they have no idea of what is happening in the other part of society. And that you can know only by going there and being in touch with them. There is no other way. So this economic model needs a fundamental rethink, and we have some options. We have uh, the Hindutva model, which somebody propounded once. We have the green model. We have the Gandhian model. We have the uh, social capitalism model. We have models. It's not that there are no alternative models, but some mix and match is necessary to create some sort of a model, which I think will be a transition from capitalism to social capitalism.
I think even, I mean, apart from this pandemic tragedy, it was known that the disparities are increasing vastly.
Yes,
So
yes,
this model anyway has been, I mean, it's becoming known to be unviable in that sense.
true. Also,
It's environmentally disastrous and disparities are rising everywhere. It's
yes,
not in
true,
just our country.
true. We are seeing this 80-20 phenomena everywhere. That 20% of people have 80% of wealth.
Right.
And that is true across the board. 80-20 is true across the board. And very importantly, one thing which we miss is the economic structure and the political structure, the way they come together. They create a situation where the big industry doesn't have a problem, but the small industry gets exploited.
Yes.
So largest of employment is in the small industry, what we call MSME, micro, small and medium industries, medium enterprises. So 80% of employment in mostly all the countries is in MSMEs, in the manufacturing sector. In other part is in agriculture. That's a different story. But agriculture and MSME put together, they will have almost 80% of people. In some countries maybe 70, some countries maybe 60, but I don't think any country less than 60. So predominant majority will be in agriculture, MSME put together, and they are the victims of the administrative system which harasses them. And they are the tax authorities, the economic structures, all of that come in. And that also is one element of this economic rethinking of how to do administration in economics. Because this is something we have not actually put attention to. We only look forward to economic policies, but not economic administration. And that needs a very deep rethink on how to automate it, make it online, and make it as human free as possible. In fact, we are introducing automation in factories, but we are not introducing automation in administration where it is actually necessary. I mean,
Let us hope,
we
yeah.
should have a people-free government, right? And people in the industry. We have the reverse. We have people-free industry and unrequired people in the government.
Right. Okay, so now we come to the political aspects of this pandemic and its effect. I mean, how do you see that?
I see it essentially as the exposure of sham democracy. Democracies across the world for the last 25 years have been sham democracies. They are not real democracies. The real person on the street actually has no voice in the government or policy making or administration. For him, it is a self-elected imperial rule. The imperialism, the colonialism has not ended. It is just that it has become self-elected. Otherwise, there is no way the man on the street has any power. He has no power, no say in the government.
Right.
And there is an elite circle, almost a dynastic circle in every democracy now. And that elite circle in cahoots with the multinational corporations, media, judiciary, and the security companies They are together running the whole show. And anyone who tries to challenge them, they will not get together and finish him off in various ways.
And vote is the only power which anyway gets utilized every 5 years or 4 years or something.
Yeah, so it
And
is
the
like
man is completely powerless.
so it's like electing a 5-year dictatorship.
Yeah, exactly.
That all you have is the
So,
power to elect your dictator.
right.
Otherwise,
And that also works in 5 years.
once in
It's
five
not
years,
even that he has
uh,
any say in during that period. If something goes wrong, nobody is answerable to him.
true, true. So this complete marginalization of the person has created these sham democracies across the world. And one of the outcomes of this is that people see it's no difference between a democracy and a non-democracy. And if this continues for a long time, people will choose anybody who brings in order and growth and promises some free benefits because it doesn't matter otherwise, everyone is the same. So this is something that really needs an addressal at the global level, at people's level first. That there has to be a people's debate on how to break this elite circle and this decentralized power to the people, what we call power to the people to be a fact, not just a rhetorical statement. At present, it's only a rhetorical statement, nothing else.
Yes. Yes.
So this political system, that is one element. First is the power to the people. Second is the systems themselves. We need some laws in place so that dynasties don't perpetuate. We don't have only the rich and the famous coming into it. We don't have only media manipulators coming into it. There has to be some performance evaluation. There has to be some standardization. So all those things of sort of creating some sort of true democracy, maybe with a right to recall, maybe with age limitation of contesting elections or how many times you can contest, on limits on dynasties, maybe even reservation according to economic situations. We don't know what form it has to take, but we have to debate out all these issues and find out some form where we can address this element of sham democracy, because this COVID tragedy has made clear that politics is not entertainment. When it comes to a difficult situation, it's a life and death question. And therefore, in such situations, there is no way out but to have a good government. And world over, it has been found how uh, inefficient the governments have been, and how the leaders have been busy only in making money even out of the COVID. So this, I think, is the political aspect of it, that we have to debate out how to bring people of substance and efficiency with some sort of social justice into the system, which at present by default is not happening and will not happen on its own. So no matter how long the debate goes, 5 or 10 years, but some sort of public opinion has to be created to have some sort of uh, aristocracy of the meritocratic get into those power structures, one, and two, power flow back to the people. And they have a say in everyday working of the government.
Right. The next aspect is cultural aspect, socio-cultural aspect,
Yeah,
so to say.
the COVID tragedy has very interestingly brought out this aspect also, because over the last 25 years, culturally, we have moved from collective living to individual living. And what COVID has done is it has forced us to rethink on this unnatural way of living, because people living alone just could not handle themselves. Many people actually died because there was no one to take care of them. And the same happened with nuclear families where there were only 2 people or 3 people. One or two of them got COVID. There was no one to run around. And we realize in this kind of situations that the patient himself cannot survive unless he's taken care of by somebody. So it's a life and death situation, survival question, not a something a cosmetic question. It's a very survival question, and it tells us that we can survive in difficult situations only in groups, not as individuals or in nuclear families. The
Because
greater
there
the
are many
tra-
people who are, yeah, sorry,
the greater the tragedy, the larger the group we need.
very true.
Sorry, you were saying
People
something.
are realizing the value of human relationships,
Yes, yes.
essential, which is again community or collectivity that you are referring to.
Uh, there is a very old village saying. It says it takes a village to raise a child, and that is so true because we see children being brought up in nuclear families. The first 3 years of child rearing are traumatic for everyone. After a few days of 24/7 duties, both the parents are irritated, and it has very difficult implications on the psychology of the child.
Right. Yes.
And it is inevitable because nobody can do 24/7 duties for more than 2 or 3 days. You can't do it for 3 years. So it requires at least 4 to 5 people who can take turns to bring up a child in a healthy way. It's not the job of a couple, it's actually a group job. So this always has been there, but uh, we were still stumbling through it. But with this kind of a situation and life and death question coming in, I can take example of my own father. He's 83. And had I not been with him 24/7 for so many days, he would not have survived. There was no way he could manage himself, completely out of question. And most people also cannot afford to be in hospitals for such a long period of time.
Yes.
So there is no point of self-sufficiency or being an island unto oneself in these situations. And this, I think, has brought about very profound questions. One, this COVID has happened at a time where the marriage system already is under considerable strain and almost in collapse in many countries. Two, we don't have young population to substitute the old in many countries. Three, we know the difficulties of the marriage system and other forms of systems which existed before, and we are trying out new systems. And fourth, the necessity of groups. So the difficulty of living together and the imperative of living together.
Yes.
With these two, somehow we have to find a solution. And that solution can be many things. I personally believe in the solution of synergetic multiple formats of culture. And I have put forward 4 different cultures: the traditional culture, the poetic culture, the spiritual culture, and the tribal culture. Or you can say, uh, you can coin it differently. I have explained them in details, but this multiple format cultures working together synergetically, that is one way out. I'm sure if everyone puts its head, many new ideas will come and something will come out of it.
Right.
So this whole idea of how to live collectively, how to raise children, how to help each other in medical terms, this all needs a fundamental rethink. What is going on obviously is neither desirable nor enough nor even tolerable.
Uh, I mean, we were talking about the impact of pandemic on the political aspects, and you mentioned the desirability of welfare state and all. I have a question pertaining to that. That this crisis, it seems to have accentuated the need for a cultural philosophy,
Right, right.
which can kind of incorporate all these other aspects that we have discussed so far. I
True.
mean, the medical aspect, the cultural aspects, the political and the economic aspect.
Right. So you are right because there are two ways of approaching this tragedy. One way is that You see problems in these 4 areas and you create some policies and programs in each of the 4 areas and it goes on. That can be one way of responding to this tragedy with some short-term and some moderate-term programs and policies. But a better way to approach this tragedy is to analyze it deeply the way we have done together today and come out with a philosophical architecture of which these things are parts of.
Right. Can you just hold the recording?
So this is where the second part is to have a philosophy. So one approach would be to have uh, separate policies and programs for these areas. Second would be to have an overarching philosophy, a foundation, and from there you can have policies and programs emerging to address these areas. What that philosophy will be named is something different. You can give any name. You can call it a holistic philosophy. You can call it a holistic spiritual philosophy, whatever name you give. But the uh, substance will be this, that it will be based upon pluralism. It will be based upon our experience of last 50 years, and it will be based upon uh, concrete systemic changes, not just NGO protests, but concrete systemic changes which are there to stay and introduce lasting changes in these 4 or 5 areas. And most importantly, it should be done after a global online debate where people everywhere collaborate together and debate out things and in their own country's context, whatever works, they put it forward. But the basic principles will remain the same. That is a possibility now, given that we are all interconnected. And if we do it, I think we will be doing a constructive debate and analysis on the COVID tragedy and really creating a good action plan for future and not getting into a situation of either stone throwing or blame game and then waiting for the next pandemic.
From whatever we've discussed, it seems like, I mean, of course, we've discussed all the various aspects in details and what can be done now for the future and all. But one thing very clearly emerges is that there has been a lot of injustice to the common man in this pandemic, in in all the aspects. I mean, political, social, economic, and medical,
Yes,
especially
true.
in terms of financial things and the way that he was or she was treated, or the patient and the relatives were treated, and all that.
Yeah,
So, I mean, many people have suffered, but they have no voice, I'm sure.
true.
They've just suffered.
True.
So, do you think that this should be taken up as a some kind of a discourse, a serious discourse, where some solutions can emerge?
Very true. My personal feeling is we should set up a, the first best option is for the United Nations to set up a Patients Justice Commission, which goes into the whole tragedy of COVID and also into the last 50 years of allopathy and gets justice to people who were wronged by allopathy or wronged by their government or did not get treatment by the hospital and so on. And this can have many areas the commission can go into. You can have sub-commissions to go into focused areas. If this cannot be done because of multinational pressure, then the second best thing to happen is to have national level Patients Justice Commission. And I'm sure in India, if somebody goes to the court will help in assisting in creating such a commission because it's not a question of hundreds and thousands, but many millions who have been done injustice in this COVID tragedy. My own case is one of those cases where we were literally exploited by the hospital and not given proper service. And if a patient justice commission is set up, I would be one of the first to depose before them. And I'm sure, similar to me, there would be not hundreds and thousands, but millions of people in India. who were not treated well by the hospital, or who were exploited by the hospital, or who did not get government support when they wanted government support lawfully. Take, for example, the provision of oxygen. It's government duty, the government failed, and therefore they should compensate the families who have lost people. Take the example of the National Disaster Management Act, which says that if somebody is killed in a calamity because of government not being able to do enough, he should get 4 lakh rupees as compensation to the family. In the Supreme Court, the government has clearly said it cannot do it. It cannot obey its own laws. And you say that right in the Supreme Court and nothing happens. So this also needs to be addressed. Similarly, this whole idea of who gave clearance to those half-baked ideas about the trials and errors which happened, hydroxychloroquine, plasma, remdesivir and whatnot. And why the solutions coming out uh, from alternative therapies, why were they suppressed? Not to mention the 50 years of many medicines which were at one time blockbuster, given to everyone, then they were found to be harmful and then banned. So from blockbuster to ban, and in between millions of people are given that medicines, and we don't know how many millions have suffered and what they have suffered. So this injustice done by allopathy to patients over the last 50 years needs to be investigated. And the Patients Justice Commission should go into all of these aspects. COVID aspects, as well as 50 years of injustice done to patients by government, by hospitals, by pharma companies, and by medical authorities, including ICMR and WHO. And this is not something that government will be glad to set up. This is something that people have to fight so that it is set up. Opposition parties have to take it up, NGOs have to take it up, and the Supreme Court has to take it up. Only then justice will be done and it won't have a repeat of what has happened in the last 50 years and in this corona tragedy. It will not repeat again. It's like almost a Nuremberg kind of trial, that what has happened in this tragedy and for the last 50 years because of side effects of allopathy is nothing less than crimes against humanity. And these crimes against humanity have to be addressed with justice.
Yeah, we come to the end of our conversation. And there, I feel that as a result of this discourse or whatever, I mean, citizens need to become more aware, and somewhere NGOs also can start playing more proactive role. I mean, people and NGOs can make big networks or something. I don't know. It's just
Yes, true. And the minimum that any NGO can do is to do two things. Open two websites. One is My COVID Story, so that every person is able to upload his COVID story, so that everyone comes to know actually what has happened.
what has happened, right?
So the suppression of facts does not happen, distortion of fact does not happen, and know the truth. Ask everyone to put up their Aadhaar card number, and their email address and their story, so that it can be verified. And it doesn't become a political football or a mudslinging game. Authentic
Right.
people give their stories as far as possible in video. If not in video, then at least they give the Aadhaar card numbers and the emails so you can verify. So at least we will know what has happened. And that will involve how people have been treated by government, by hospital, private hospitals, and all sorts of things. So we don't even know what injustice has been done or has happened. So at least the first thing to do is to know what has happened, and that will come up in this website, mycovidstory.com. And the second the NGOs can do is to create a global COVID debate.com, so that everyone can come with their constructive analysis and suggestions for future. Even if these two small measures are undertaken, I think the constructive analysis and work out of the COVID tragedy will at least seem to have started off.
Right. And as you said earlier, that many people have suffered and many people know that there is something fundamentally wrong, but they are not able to articulate.
Yes.
So on such forums, possibly they'll learn or get find ways to articulate their through their stories.
It's all bottled up
That
inside.
what has yes yes
It's all
what
bottled
has
up inside.
happened, and even solutions as they see it, because they have learned from their own experience.
So everything is bottled up inside. And once they get the first few words and language, they will also be able to
Right.
articulate.
Right. I'll have to take this phone this again. So yes, we were talking about like people finding they're trying to articulate, having their voice through these kind of forums. It is very important what you're suggesting. If and I don't think it really costs much, or it's a simple measure. You're muted.
Yes, because I think out of this tragedy, the minimum two things that can come out are this. Have to come out are this. One, a deep analysis of the whole tragedy, including all its aspects,
Right.
political, economic, cultural, medical. And two, action plan for the future. These are the minimum two things which should come out of deep analysis and a vision exercise. If these two things don't come out, no amount of journalistic reporting has any value for future.
Very true. Very true. It just becomes very kind of just a subject of curious talk, and that's all. Then everyone forgets about it,
True.
and
It's
you're
used,
back to your own routines.
it's only used for short-term political ammunition. That's it.
Yeah, exactly. And also to take out one's own frustrations at the
Yes.
political system, economic system, health system, and but then there is no solution or vision for the future.
So anger has to lead to constructive analysis and action plan.
Right. Yeah. Okay, Mr. Vaidya, thank you so much for this open conversation. And I think talking about this issue, which apparently sounds only just a medical issue, but
Yes.
it's much deeper and broader,
True.
and has present people have suffered, and they've really suffered. But in future, at least it can be minimized or avoided as much as it can be. At an individual level, also collectively, I don't know how. I mean, how many years this all things may take, but at least individually, if people can learn from their experiences and kind of prevent further tragedies,
True. Very true.
so this should be very helpful, and in definitely in articulating their issues and all that. That's a very good suggestion. Thank you so much.
Thank
Uh, for any feedback, any queries, do write to us at hvindia@gmail.com. Namaste.
you. Namaste.